Some interesting quotes came out over this Tampa Bay series that I want to bring to you, and I dug into some numbers. So the first one came after Game 1. It was Chris Bassitt. You probably saw this. He said, I think a lot of people thought our identity was our hitting coming into the year. Now it's kind of an awkward panic. But I think our identity is just pitching and defense. I think that's what wins World Series is pitching and defense. After yesterday's game, Sunday's game, the final game against Tampa Bay, Brandon Belt, who's not playing but has been traveling with the team, he said this. He goes, in my opinion, pitching and defense is what wins you games in the playoffs with timely hitting. We've been doing that really well. A lot of times, who can make the least amount of mistakes in the playoffs wins. That's where we've been excelling, and that's going to bode well for when we get into the playoffs. Before I get into some of the numbers that I pulled, because, when I think of a World Series team, I think of power, I think of home runs. That seems to be the case with teams that win the World Series. But for you, what ingredients make a World Series team?
I agree. I do agree with you. Like the last year's Philadelphia Phillies would like a word on the we have to have good pitching and good. They didn't have either one of those things. They just bashed the ball and made the World Series. It's an interesting case study. It's a stretch to look at how they won the Rays series, and whereas like they just played a little bit cleaner. They waited out the mistakes. They played clean. They sort of played, the old mistake-free football. They didn't turn the ball over. They didn't give away outs. They didn't make mistakes. They don't throw wild pitches. The catchers don't give pass balls. They don't get crossed up. They do a really, really, really great job of that, like underratedly great job for all the praise we give the pitching. They've stolen like 90 or something like 90 runs defensively. That's astronomical. They're like 30 runs ahead of the rest of the league in that way. But the timely hitting is a big part of that. And I think the key takeaways from that is mistake-free is limiting the randomness, limiting the chaos, because that is what you're dealing with in baseball, and limiting the extra things. So many times you see it in the playoffs, a ball bounces in that shouldn't, or an error gets made, and the next pitch gets sent to the moon, and that's where the problems compound, and the camera gets shaky, and suddenly you don't trust your bullpen. That all comes from mistakes. And I think what they're talking about is minimizing mistakes, and I think that is pretty close to right on. That is sort of has been, when you look back at the season, it's obviously been, you expect a lot from the offense a lot of this way, but they other than the 4 games against Texas, I don't remember them really going on an extended losing streak. And the reason for that was the pitching and defense just didn't really get blown out, right? They would win games 3-1, or they would win games 2-1, or they would lose 3-1, or there was a lot of low scoring, but they were coming out on the right side of it. And the wins didn't feel great, but they were doing enough to get themselves where they are. And I think that is a really good sign, because now, as we're seeing, you get a dash, you get 2 clutch hits in a game, and they're up 5-1, and the game's over because they have the bullpen, because they have the starting pitching, and they have the defense. That's going to be put to the test, obviously, to the max in the playoffs. But the other side of this is, if they get in, who are you really scared of, right? Who else is playing really mistake-free baseball? You have an 83-win team in the Central. You have the teams in the West that keep tripping all over each other's, and you have this brand new young Baltimore team that is just sort of not slumped at any point all year long. The window is there if they can play mistake free, and as Brandon Belt said, just get a couple timely hits, get 3 timely hits. They have the pitching, they have the defense to take care of the rest of the pieces. There's plenty of reason to believe that this is a model that can win in the playoffs. I think the quiet part loud is, you have Gausman, you have Barrios, and you have Bassitt. Are you going to be using Ryu? Are you going to be using Kikuchi? Or are you leaning really heavy on those 3 guys in a playoff rotation? You probably do. You're probably waiting for a 7-game series to slip in a Kikuchi, and maybe he's piggybacked with Ryu. But they certainly have 3 guys that I think you're pretty confident in pitching in big spots in this playoff spot. So yeah, in terms of a base to build a playoff winning team, I do think sort of pitching and defense is a pretty good model, especially with the potential, as we've seen, the potential that the lineup has to put up numbers in a hurry if they can get it clicking.
Yeah, and it's just been that this season, right? The potential, waiting for it to crack. We've seen it happen before, but this can be an exceptional offensive power hitting team. So the numbers that I pulled up, this is the postseason stats from 2019 to 2022. In 2022, when the Astros beat Phillies 4-2, in terms of home runs, the Phillies topped in that postseason with 24. Astros, number 2, both teams in the World Series. In terms of pitching, 2 had the better pitching staffs in the postseason at the time. 2021, the Braves beat the Astros 4-2. Those damn Astros in the World Series once again. Home runs, Braves, number 1. Astros, number 3. Both pitching staffs were good, not great. 2020, Dodgers beat the Rays. Rays and Dodgers, 1 and 2 in terms of home runs. Pitching for the Dodgers was good. For the Rays, they gave up the most bombs, so not great. 2019, the Nationals beat the Astros. Those Astros again. Home runs, 1 and 2. Astros and Nationals. And the pitching for both sides, I mean, they had incredible rotations. Verlander, Greinke, Garrett Cole, Scherzer, Strasburg, Anibal Sanchez, incredible. So the Jays definitely, I agree with you. They have the pitching, they have the defense. I'm not going to disagree with Brandon Belt, who's got, 2 rings. You cannot disagree with that, and I've never played the game. But with that said, it's all good to have the pitching and the defense, but if you're not connecting, I feel like the Jays need to figure this out right now. And maybe the turning point was this Tampa series, but without the long ball, it just feels like they can't make that deep push into the postseason.
Yeah, and there's reasons for that. And I think one of the chief ones is you run into a lot of good pitching this time of the year. That's sort of the whole point. And it's a lot harder to rely on we're going to hit 4 singles. We're going to hit multiple doubles in this inning to put up runs, right? You're sort of in the playoffs. The reasons those teams with home runs are succeeding so well is it can be really hard to put together sustained rallies against great pitching. Maybe you have to rely on the one big swing got us 2 runs here, and that was really important. One big swing won us this game because things get so tight and extra base runners get so hard to come by. That is sort of part and parcel, and it really has been a the last 10 years. The bullpen usage in playoff games has really amped up, and the power arms, and these guys are throwing so hard, and they're not afraid to that sort of instant offense is a big part of sort of building the modern team. So I do agree with you. They're going to have to find the power on the paper again with Vladimir Guerrero Jr., with Bichette, with George Springer. You on paper, you do have the guys that can deliver those moments when they have them, and it's going to be, I didn't want to say make or break, but you will see a lot more leaning on those home runs in these big spots than trying to piece together the bases loaded walk rallies, the 4 straight walks. The new calling card is to just not swing.
I know walks. I mean, really good at bats. We got to give them credit for the really good at bats.
Certainly,
but a lot of walks, a lot of wild pitches over the past couple of series, and it's like if those things don't happen, I mean, it's baseball. They did happen. It can't erase them. But if those things don't happen based on what their bats are doing, they probably don't win a lot of those series.